So what I've done now is add another laptop to the topology. We have to obviously plug that into the network, so I'll plug it in here. So I've got 3 devices now connected to my physical network. In PacketTracer, we still only have 2, so we need to add the 3rd device to the topology. What I'm going to do is go to End Devices, and rather than adding a laptop, I'm going to add a server to the topology in PacketTracer. So you can see it says server 0 there. I'll move this up a bit, and then we need to connect the network. What type of cable do we need? We need a copper straight through cable. So I'm going to select the switch and use the next available Ethernet interface, a gigabit Ethernet 103, and I'll connect that to fast Ethernet on the server. And as you can see there, it's connected. Now we're not seeing the labels here because I went to Options, Preferences, and unchecked Always Show the Labels. You can keep that if you prefer. It's really up to you. But what I'm going to do here is go to Notes and add gigabit 103. And I'll add another note for the interface on the server. I'll select that option there, go to Options, Preferences, and remove Always Show Port Labels in Logical Workspace. Again, the reason I like to do this is so that I can move the labels around myself. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Okay, so let's create another label here and say that this server is going to be configured with IP address 192.168.1.3 with the same subnet mask. We'll be covering subnet masks in a lot of detail later, so don't worry too much about it if you're not quite sure. But there's the IP address of the server. We need to configure that, obviously. So I'm going to click on the server. You can see this looks very much like a physical server. Servers come in different shapes and sizes, but here's an example of a server with some hard drives in it. This is old, so you can see it looks like a floppy disk in there and a DVD or CD in the server, so quite old, and you can see the fast Ethernet interface. Again, go to Config, and now we need to configure the IP address of the server. So fast Ethernet 0. Let's give this a MAC address of 3. So 0003 followed by 4 3s, the dot and another 4 3s. Static IP address or manual IP address is going to be 192.168.1.3. Subnet mask is automatically configured. We can go to settings and set our default gateway. It's not required, but you may want to fill that in, and we may want to fill in our DNS server. So just to repeat, fast Ethernet 0, IP address is configured, subnet mask is configured. Under settings, we configured the default gateway and DNS server. Going to desktop, command prompt now, I'll type ipconfig, and you can see the IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway. At this point, I should hopefully be able to ping PC1. Remember, ping checks network connectivity. Are you there? And then the other device replies, yes, I am. So there we go. We can ping PC1 or laptop 1 and a laptop 2. We have IP connectivity between the server and the laptops, and we can prove that very easily once again by using ping. Okay, so that's in our topology in PacketTracer, but let's do the same on the physical devices. So on my new laptop, the one on my left there, I'm going to go to Network and Internet Settings. I'm going to select Ethernet 6 and look at its properties. As you can see, IP assignment is automatic DHCP, but what I want to do is go Edit, change that to manual or static, IP address 192.168.1.3, subnet mask, default gateway, DNS server, and click Save. Again, I'll be covering a lot of this information as we go through the course, so don't worry too much if you're struggling about the layout of the IP addresses. Okay, so what I'll do is open up a command prompt, and I'll type ipconfig. You can see the IP address is 192.168.1.3, and what I'll do now is ping 192.168.1.1, so that works, and ping 192.168.1.2. So I can ping both these laptops from that laptop. So I've physically shown you what's happening in this topology. I've got a physical Cisco switch and 3 laptops. But as mentioned, ping is okay to test connectivity, but that doesn't show services running on a server. So I'm going to click on the server, and I'm going to go to Services. And on the left-hand side here, you can see a whole bunch of services. You can see HTTP, what you use probably every single day. Going onto the internet. These days we use an encrypted version of that rather than clear text. But as you can see here, we've got HTTP and HTTPS or SSL or TLS as we call it today. So we have both a insecure as well as a secure web server running on this server in our topology. And that means that we can open up a web browser on a laptop, let's say laptop 1. So I'll click on web browser. That may take a while to load up. And then I can go to 192.168.1.3. So type the URL here and click go. And notice we see Cisco Packet Tracer. Welcome to Cisco Packet Tracer. And we can look at an image as an example on the web server. Click back. Look at a small page. Hello world. Click back. This is a web server running on this server. On laptop 2, I could do something similar. Open up a web browser. May take a while to start up, but I could type in the URL 192.168.1.3 and click go. And again, I can go and look at an image page. So I'm sending traffic from this laptop to the server, and the server is replying back. This is very similar, once again, to you going to a website on the internet. I could, as an example, go to davidbombal.com or any other web server, and I can look at the contents of a web server using my browser. That's exactly what's happening here, just on a very limited scale. Server here, various pages here. I could go and edit that hello world as an example and type something else here. This means that you need to know a bit of HTML. Don't worry about that if you don't know what that means. But I could say new text, and I could save that. So I'm going to overwrite the file that I've got there at the moment. And going back to laptop 1, I'll click on small web page and notice that is now displaying. Over here, small page, that is now displaying. I have updated the web server and that information is displayed on the client. Now that's it working in Packet Tracer. Let's look at the physical network. What I'll do is connect to the laptop at the top there, and I'll browse to 192.168.1.3. So open up Chrome, go to 192.168.1.3, this laptop over here, and notice a web server displays, Internet Information Services. That's because I'm running a web server on this laptop. If I search for IIS and open that up, I am running a web server called Default Website, as well as David Bombal on that laptop. So that laptop is running this service. As an example, if I press stop here, I've just stopped the web server. Going back to that laptop at the top there, if I refresh that page, notice it's hanging now and it says the site can't be reached. Refuse to connect. The web server has been turned off. I'm not able to connect to the web server. Go back onto this laptop running the web server, click start. I'm starting the web service up again on the laptop over there. Notice I can connect to the web server. Now in Packet Tracer, something similar should happen, but I have found it buggy at times, so I'll click on the web server. What should happen is if I turn off these services, that should no longer work. So I'll jump to DHCP, go back to HTTP, and notice if this is working properly, I will no longer be able to connect to the web server. So what I'll do is close the web browser down, open it up again, and go to 192.168.1.3. Notice it says server reset connection. And on this device, notice it says protocol timeout. We're not able to connect to the server using HTTPS or HTTP. But if I go back onto the server and enable HTTPS, and I'll jump here and then here again to make sure that it refreshes properly, go to this laptop and click go, notice the page now displays on the web server because I'm running the service. On this one, it says server reset connection, not able to connect to the server. But if I enable HTTP, so the unencrypted version of HTTP, and go back to this laptop and click go, notice it works. Again, if you're struggling with the information that I'm sharing here, don't worry too much. We're going to cover a lot of this many, many times. What I've done here is set up a server. This is a HTTP server or web server, similar to what you'll have when you connect to Google. When you go to Google or any website, they have a server, or in the real world, many, many servers, serving web pages to your client. If I go to cisco.com, a web page is displayed. My web browser on my laptop is opening up a page to a server, in this case, cisco.com. That's resolved to an IP address. I'm connecting to that server and a web page displays. Something very similar is happening here. Notice on the left-hand side, we've got a DNS server, we've got DHCP, TFTP. These are various servers that you'll learn about as we go through the course. we've got an email server, etc. Servers could be a laptop like this, or typically a big server, or many servers doing something, providing a service. In this case, it's a web server, but could be other services. Okay, so I think that's enough. In the next video, I want to show you how to connect to a Cisco device. I'll just show you here. When you click on the device and go to CLI, you'll see some output on the device. So if I press enter here, I'll see something that says, would you like to enter the initial configuration dialog? I'll just make this bigger. And we would type no here, press enter, and then it shows switch. Before we end off, I would like you to save the topology. So I'm going to go File, Save. So decide where you want to save it. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. So let's call this Basic Network 2 Laptops and Switch. And I'll click Save, and then I can close this down. It tells me, do you want to save this again? Yes. And I'm going to say yes here, just to make sure everything is saved. And notice there's my PacketTracer file saved on my desktop. I could double click on that, and that will open it up again. And I'll be able to continue working on this topology. And notice there you go. It's back again. These little links will go from orange to green. That's running something called spanning tree to stop loops. Don't worry about that for now. We'll cover that in a lot more detail later. In the next video, I want to show you how to connect to the switch and have a look at what's called the MAC address table.